Hi, my name is Jennifer Howard. I am the owner of Facets Relational Care, and today I'm going to do a video on the different levels of health for Enneagram Type 5. So as I've been doing with all of the levels of health for 1, 2, 3, and 4 so far, I start at the bottom level, which is 9, and kind of work my way up to the most healthiest level for the Enneagram type. So we're going to do the same with Type 5 today. As I've mentioned in my other videos, I want to give credit where credit is due. The theory for the levels of health was attributed to Enneagram study by Don Riso and Russ Hudson. It's an absolutely fantastic aspect of Enneagram theory. It's one of my favorites. It adds kind of another dimension to a tool that's already so complex and so multifaceted that I think it's hard for us to fully get our heads wrapped around it anyway. So it's a really good thing to study. You know, find your number, study that if you want to. I would suggest it. So anyways, when we're talking about what we call a level 9, 5, this means a 5 that is just at the bottom of psychological health, okay? The way that I would describe a level 9, 5 is quite simply a psychopath. And that may or may not be too strong of a term. In many cases, I would say no, it's not. I'll give you some examples. When we're talking about a level 9, 5, someone that has become so detached with reality and so lost in the fantastic schematics that they have in their own mind. You have someone that is beyond paranoid with a variety of different phobias and anxieties, and their perspectives of life have become skewed. I mean, it can almost seem to the outside observer that you're dealing with someone that may be a psychopath or a sociopath or a paranoid schizophrenic to that extent. Again, some examples that came to mind are Christopher Nolan's Batman movie, The Dark Knight. That's the one that's got the Joker in it, right? I think it is. Heath Ledger plays the Joker. Level 9-5, absolutely and unquestionably. Okay, that's a good example. Another good example that I thought of, a real life example, is I believe Eric Harris from the Columbine shootings. I think everybody knows, you know, if you say Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold, everybody pretty much knows those names. Eric Harris for sure, definitely a level 9-5. If you would like a really good resource to get, I mean, like stupid detailed information on him, there's a book called simply Columbine, and the author is David Cullen. I will put that information in the little box underneath of here. I would suggest that you read it if you would like to have in what is, in my opinion, probably the best case study of a level 9 type 5 that there is. He does information on, I'm sorry, Eric Harris. He does information for Dylan Klebold as well, so he covers both of them, but Eric Harris was unquestionably a level 9-5, and he does, David Cullen does such a great job of capturing his personality and writing a psychological profile for him. And so if you want a good case study, I would recommend that material, okay? And again, I'll put the details in the information box under here. So that's a level 9. Just above a level 9, we have a level 8-5, and I think at level 8, I've never known someone who's been a level 8-5, and I'm double checking that now that I've said it out loud. Yeah, I haven't. I had a boyfriend that was pretty crazy. He was a 5. I don't think he was quite to a level 8. Excuse me. When we're talking about a level 8-5, this is someone that is, I mean, they are just barely walking the wire between being grounded in reality and what is actually factual, and being lost in that internal schematic in their head that they have built, okay, based on the phobias that they have, the paranoias that they have, those sorts of things. So it's someone that is definitely fascinated with the macabre, to say the least, probably demonstrating some frightening tendencies, things, again, that may make you wonder if perhaps they aren't maybe a sociopath, a psychopath, maybe some kind of schizophrenia in their behaviors that may make you question that. But at the same time, there's still this part of them, I think, that is aware that they're on that line. And so that just kind of intensifies the fright, I think, that internal sense of upset, that anxiety, that internal sense of being unsettled, if that makes sense. You know what I mean? This fear that something is wrong with me. I'm kind of have this paranoia going on. I don't feel like I can control it. I don't know what I can trust. I don't know if I can trust myself. In my mind, when we're talking about really depleted and disintegrated fives, like ones that are in this level, I have always felt like there was some sort of like a six-ishness to them there, whether or not they have a six wing, because it just tends to become a lot of that very unrealistic, paranoid type of thinking, close themselves off, hoard themselves in a house, get their little tinfoil hat on so the aliens don't come to get them, that kind of a thing. A really good example for a level 8-5 would be Dexter. If you have ever seen the TV show Dexter, I think you can get it on Netflix if you have Netflix. You can always buy the DVD sets. It is absolutely one of my most favorite TV series in the entire world. Dexter is unquestionably, he's like hardcore 5, just he's delicious. And I would say as he goes throughout that entire series, there's 8 seasons, he is absolutely a level 8-5. His character does a really good job of kind of hovering right there on that line where he has an obsession with killing people, but at the same time he's aware that something's wrong because it doesn't bother him to kill people. He really likes to, you know, cut someone's body up and collect their blood. And so he's constantly going through this psychological battle throughout all 8 seasons of having this insatiable need to murder somebody because it just satisfies something inside of him. But at the same time, being aware that that's not normal and wondering what's wrong with me, why am I not like anybody else, that sort of a thing. You know, I'm just gonna let it rain. I don't even care. So that's like a level 8-5. So then we're going up to a level 7-5, and a level 7-5, I would say we're probably not going to see a lot of the paranoid aspects to them necessarily, but this is someone, the paranoia is definitely there. It's just not going to be as readily observable as it would be with a level 8 or definitely a level 9. This is where we have someone, excuse me, who they're starting to feel a little paranoid. They've been kind of lost in their head a little bit too much, and they have gotten out of touch with reality. They may start to question the motives of the people that they know. They may start to kind of get into that stance that 5s can get into, where they believe that their perspective and their schematic on the world is the schematic. And this is almost kind of one-ish, you know, and the rest of us are just stupid, incompetent people. And, you know, they just can't have anything to do with the rest of us because we're all a threat because we're stupid, that kind of thing. A really, really, really great example of this is a character named Floki, who is a 5/6 ENTP in the History Channel TV show Vikings. I don't know if any of you have ever seen that. It's one of my favorite TV shows ever, if for no other reason. The way that they have written the characters so perfectly captures what realistic Enneagram and Myers-Briggs types would look like. Floki, again, 5/6 ENTP, unquestionably a level 7, especially once you get into probably about season 3, maybe season 4. But they do a great job of writing his character further into disintegration, if you will, especially when you compare him in season 4 to his character in season 1, where he was a little bit more stable, you know, maybe more like a level 5. So I would strongly recommend you watch that entire series all the way through if you haven't had an opportunity to. If for no other reason, it gives you a fantastic example of what a level 5 looks like as they begin to slowly deteriorate. And you get to see his character in the middle of all of the goings on, and you can see what's triggered that disintegration. You get to kind of get a peek behind his perspective of the things that are going on, so you understand the thoughts that are happening in the mind of a 5 as they disintegrate, which is a contributing factor to the disintegration itself. Anyways, fantastic example. I would strongly recommend that. Okay, you get to see Floki a little bit at level 6 as well, which is the next level. And this, by the way, goes up into our average levels. Okay, so 7, 8, 9 are what are considered the unhealthy levels. 4, 5, and 6 are the average levels. So you get to see in Vikings Floki again, probably a little bit level 5, level 6 for sure. And when a 5 comes to a level 6, this is the place where that sense of separation from the rest of the world, especially in terms of intellect and perspective, starts to manifest. And it can be, it's usually antagonistic. It's usually, you know, I'm better than you and you're an idiot because you don't see this. And like in Floki's case in Vikings, and this is a spoiler alert, so, you know, if you don't want to know this, you should probably stop watching now or at least skip forward, you know, maybe 5 minutes or something. He gets to a point where he disintegrates so much. He picks up a lot of that antagonism, especially towards his best friend in the series, which is Ragnar Lothbrok, who, by the way, is 8 with 7 ESTP. Fantastic example of 8 with 7 ESTP. Another great type to study if you wanted to use Vikings for a fictitious case study. That would be a good one. You see the Floki kind of pick up that antagonism against Ragnar because Ragnar starts making decisions that fall out of line with Floki's intellectual perspective of the world and what truth is. And he as he disintegrates, he gets to the point where, again, we talk about somebody that gets down to like this level 7 kind of an area, maybe level 8 or level 9 for Floki, where he ends up murdering somebody that Ragnar is friends with because he believes that Ragnar is crazy for being friends with that person. And throughout the series, Floki is trying to tell him, you don't need to be friends with this person, and here's why. And he's got all of this information and these facts that Ragnar should listen to, and Ragnar chooses not to listen to him because he's an 8 with 7 ESTP. And Floki lets it go and lets it go and lets it go because he's his friend. But over time, you know, especially when he's right at a level 6, that antagonistic feeling towards Ragnar begins to build. And there starts to be just a simmering hatred for his friend. And then the delusion starts to set in because he separates himself from Ragnar and from the rest of the village. And he begins to start plotting these crazy ideas of how he's going to murder this guy because he believes that by murdering this guy, he's going to save his best friend. And his best friend is going to suddenly realize, oh yeah, I shouldn't have been friends with that guy. Thanks, Floki, for murdering him so I could see the light. You know what I mean? That's the sort of stuff that we're talking about in a 5 that's really disintegrated. So, but you really see him at a level 6 when he starts to get frustrated with Ragnar as he's befriending someone that Floki thinks he shouldn't be friends with. And so, anyways, just a lot of that separation starts there. Then we go up to a level 5. Level 5 is someone, they're still pretty detached from society. There's not any antagonism there, I don't think, maybe not much anyway. And this is someone, though, who is basically just interested in being involved with themselves. It's a dangerous place to be because they participate in so much isolation. I think that it's dangerous to be as isolated as 5s isolate themselves sometimes, because when you remain in so much isolation for such a significant length of time, you run a very high risk of limiting the input that you're receiving from the outside world. And you need different ideas and things, whether you like them or not, whether they fit into what your idea of truth is, whether they fit into your overall schematic or not. You need to be taking in new ideas and new perspectives of other people because it just sharpens what you have. You can test what you know against that. And that's what helps us stay grounded in reality. To be off on our own and spending too much time in contemplation is a very dangerous thing to do. To be too, I don't know, just isolated from social interaction and input that we don't necessarily like or agree with, right? But 5s who are at this level can kind of start to get into that a little bit, and that's where it starts to get dangerous, I think. Anyways, a really good example of a level 5 would be Sherlock Holmes, played by Robert Downing Jr. If you haven't seen that movie, there was 2. Watch those. He is a perfect example of a level 5. I absolutely love that that character. You'll see in that movie he's a little competitive. He's definitely a very arrogant person, really stuck on himself, that kind of a thing. But there's not that sense of antagonism. There's not that sense of it's me against the world. But he's extremely withdrawn from the world. He almost has an interest in things that are, you know, definitely some weird interest, things that have nothing to do with anything. There's a lot of time wasting there. There's a lot of indulgence of the processes of the mind just for the sake of indulging them. So there's like a scene in there where he's got like some flies in a jar and he's sitting there in the room and he's got this kind of little stringed instrument of some kind, a violin, whatever he has in his hand, and he's kind of plucking away at these strings, and the flies are flying in one direction, and somebody walks in, and I forget who the character is now, and he says, "Did you know that if you play this instrument in the key of such and such, these flies can hear it and it causes them to fly in a counterclockwise circle. And the person there is like, you haven't left the house in 2 months. This isn't healthy. So anyways, it's a really good example of a level 5/5. If you want to watch that, again, I strongly suggest that you do, if for no other reason, just to get a good fictitious case study that way. So that's a good example. Another good example of probably a level 5/5, this is more of a family example. I always have my Disney references, you guys know that, would be Elsa from Frozen. She's a 5. She's for the most part a level 5/5 throughout the whole film. She is, again, an extremely detached character, so much to the point that out of her fear, she, runs away. I'm sure everybody's seen the movie. I mean, we could quote the stupid Let It Go song, even if we don't want to. And she, she runs away. She goes and has her little ice castle there on the mountain over there in the, on the edge of the woods on the mountain there. And she becomes so lost, I think, in her character in that movie becomes so lost, especially emotionally, but her character is also an INFJ. So for her, there's a lot of emotional, there's a lot of being lost emotionally, not necessarily just intellectually. So anyways, her character is a level 5/5 in that same respect, this need to indulge the self emotionally, intellectually, to kind of separate oneself from society and create a secluded place where they can live and support the ideas that they have in their head, you know what I mean? Or to support the schematic, or to support the feelings of isolation, which kind of quell the anxieties that they have, that sort of a thing. So then we go up to a level 4, which is the top of the average level. And this, I think, most of the 5s that I have known have been here. These are 5s that, I think they're a little insecure. They're kind of shy about making themselves known or speaking up or diving into action, but they feel really comfortable with study and acquiring information and asking questions and having the intellectual discussions in the debates and that sort of a thing. But they have a hard time, again, necessarily like asserting the self, if that makes sense. So a lot of acquisition of knowledge, maybe not necessarily immediate application, but these 5s are pretty average people, I would say. I think, again, most of the 5s that I know are here, probably most of the 5s that you know as well. This tends to be, as I have seen, even in fictitious TV characters, the most common type of 5 that's depicted. And this is someone who, they just, they live life. They don't draw a lot of attention to themselves. When they spend their time alone, they spend a lot of time reading about things that interest them, watching things maybe on YouTube that interest them. If you're a 5 and you watch my channel or any other channel, I'm sure if you're a 5, you're watching a variety of channels because you're probably trying to get a lot of different pieces of information to put together so that you can weigh them against each other and see what you believe is true and what you don't believe is true, which is a very 5 thing to do, which is fantastic. And you are probably someone that knows like a hell of a lot about the Enneagram, but you're not like me in the sense that you're making videos and you're using it to teach other people, or you're not like me in the sense that you have, in the sense that I've started like a life coaching business on the side where I use the Enneagram to help people work through their life problems. That's taking that information and putting it into action. And 5s, most 5s, especially ones at a level 4 and lower, don't necessarily do that. They want to know it because just the act of knowing it gives them that sense of confidence that they need to help quell that anxiety that they're incompetent or that they're useless, right? And so anyways, you see someone that spends a lot of time studying, maybe working on skills. My uncle, I mentioned in a video, I did a video a while back called Making It Work with Type 5, and I talked about my uncle. He is a 5 with 6 INTP, and I was talking about how he has started, he started his own farm, and he, got some turkeys and some chickens, and he's never done any of that before. And then he started woodworking and carving things out of wood and doing all of this cool stuff. And he started craft brewing his beer at home and all of this stuff. That's something that you'll see with like a level 4 or 5. They're still very reclusive. They don't necessarily prefer the interaction, but they will find skills and things that they can do. They may not necessarily actually use them to make money or put them out into the world in such a way that they could be useful and beneficial for others, but it's something to entertain them, to capture their intellect in some way, and they become masters at these things. And they're people you would never know they were as good at what they're good at because they don't demonstrate it. You know, they have all these secret talents and that sort of a stuff, and none of us would have any idea because, you know, if they're interacting with the rest of the world, they're just quiet and taking in information versus actively participating, if that makes sense. So when we go up to the healthy levels of type 5, we have like a level 3 5. So level 3 5s, they are 5s that have all of those skills, like my uncle has, for example. They've done all of the study, like most 5s have done. They have some of that expertise in the things that they find very, very fascinating, and they have gotten to this place where they are comfortable enough with the self to apply those things. You know what I mean? That anxiety, that fear that they're not competent. I won't say that it's not there, because I think if you're a 5, I mean, whatever your Enneagram number is, your core fear is always there. I mean, I know just speaking as a 6, my core fears are always there. The difference is, you know, we make the choice as to whether or not we're going to agree with those fears in the moment. And so when you're a level 3 5, these are 5s that have learned how to act outside of that fear, you know. So they're taking the things that they know, the things that they're good at, and they're finding ways to apply them in the world. It's easier to see, if you know someone who's a level 3 5, it would be easier for you to say, oh, this person's really good at this, this, and this, and they're really into that, that, and that, and they know a whole lot about this, that, and the other, because they're more demonstrative with it, because they've got that comfort level of, yeah, you know what, I'm expert here and I'm really good at this. I'm going to start putting this out into the world now. That kind of a thing. A really, really good example of a level 3 5 is, there is a movie, there's only 200 movies, Dracula. And the one I'm talking about has Gary Oldman, Keanu Reeves, Winona Ryder, and Anthony Hopkins as Van Helsing. And that is the character that is a great example of a level 3 5, is Van Helsing, played by Anthony Hopkins. In that movie, you know, he's the vampire hunter, and he kind of shows up, you know, onto the scene, and he's incredibly knowledgeable. He knows he's knowledgeable. He kind of owns his shit. And he's like, this is what you do, this is what you don't do, don't bother me, just let me do what I do, that kind of a thing. Still very much an eccentric character. He has absolutely no social cues. He kind of missed a lot of social contacts, no filter whatsoever. He just says whatever comes into his mind and spits it out, which is a common thing that you see with 5s, especially if they're thinking type 5s in Myers-Briggs. And like NTs especially, they just kind of say it. And anyways, so his character is a great example of that. He is a very well manifested 5 who has taken that obsession that he has and the knowledge that he's gained from having that intellectual obsession and turned it into something that's marketable and profitable and an active thing that he can do and produce and put into the world. So that's like a level 3 5. Then we go to a level 2 5. Level 2 5s are, I think at this point, there's almost this sense of wisdom that starts to emanate from 5s. They're still quiet people, still people that would prefer to observe before they interact, but they're people that don't necessarily need to hold tightly to one particular belief system or another. They're very, very comfortable with taking in a lot of data and kind of like I talked about earlier, sharpening information against other pieces of information. There's not a lot of judgment here. These are, God, some of my favorite types of 5s in the entire world. And because they remain so open, and because they don't apply judgment, and because they're willing to hold a variety of different types of information in their hands, these are people that over time, it's like they have these profound insights into life that the rest of us miss. I would say that tends to be especially true if they're intuitive types in Myers-Briggs anyway, whether they're NFs or NTs. This is something that tends to be very true of that. So we have someone that is paying very, very close attention. They're taking in lots of data. They're very aware of details and nuances, and they're good at putting all of that together in some sort of just intuitive schematic, and they can have these just genius insights, whether they're practical or emotional or spiritual, that come out of that. I mean, they're just dropping these bombs on us, and we're like mind blown. A great example, C.S. Lewis. Yeah, for the most part, I mean, he's had, if you read a variety of his books, and he's written a crap ton of books, you can see, depending on the book, that he's been in different levels of health throughout his life, as we all have, which makes sense. But for the most part, most of his writings would indicate a level 2-5. So that's a really good example there. When we talk about a level 1-5, this is a 5 at their absolute best. These are 5s that change the world. These 5s, to me, when we talk about integration in Enneagram, there's always the number that you integrate to. These are the 5s that, in my mind, I mean, just can almost look 8-ish, because it's like they can walk into any situation and they just see the things that nobody else sees. They're very inventive. They're very creative. They're these visionaries because they don't allow themselves to be held back by one particular viewpoint or another. They're willing to take information in all the time and say, well, this is relevant right now, and this is what's going to work, so we're going to use it, and this will work tomorrow, and this, that, and the other. Just fantastic people that have this ability to cut through the unnecessary bullshit that the rest of us are getting lost in. And they just come in and they're like, oh, here's the answer. And then you're like, wow, it was right there in front of my face the whole time and I didn't see it. So they kind of have this gift for drawing out just the nutshell. You know what I mean? I have found the 5s that watch my videos. Well, sometimes the ones that comment, I have a lot of 5s that want to get into the intellectual discussions with me, and their comments can be long, which is fine. I love that. But then I have 5s that will take what I say in a 30-minute video and they succinctly wrap it up in a nutshell. And they'll put a comment under the video and they'll say something like, so basically what you're saying is blah, 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 done. And I'm like, and I'll read those and I'm like, yeah, that is what I was saying. I don't know, maybe I'm a very long-winded person, which if you watch my channel. So I feel like maybe I need just like a really healthy 5 to kind of sit at my side and just put into summation what I'm trying to say, because they're just good at seeing life that way. A good example of a level 1-5, I think, would be Steve Jobs. And I don't know enough about Steve Jobs to say whether or not he was actually a 5. I don't know. But a lot of what I do know about him would indicate that he was a 5 and a level 1-5, for that matter. So I'll give you an example. If you ever get an opportunity to read the book Boundaries for Leaders by Dr. Henry Cloud, I would strongly suggest that you do that. It's absolutely fantastic. Everybody in the world should read that book. He talks about, in that book, there was a meeting that was held at Apple, obviously, and they were talking about introducing all of these new products and this, that, and the other, and Steve Jobs was sitting in on the meeting, and he didn't say anything. He sat kind of on the side of the room and listened and let all of these people in this meeting talk about, well, this is what we're thinking about coming out with next, and this is what needs to be refined here, and this is another really great idea that was proposed, and we could actually improve this product that's already existing by doing this. And he's just listening, doesn't say anything, and the meeting is going on and on and on and on and on, and it's not wrapping up. And he notices that the people who are sitting in on this meeting and doing all of these discussions, it's almost like they're confusing each other. They're throwing so many ideas out on the table that they can't even sort through them anymore. And he's listening to it, and he's getting this headache just listening to all this nonsense because it's too much. And finally, after sitting in this meeting and doing nothing but listening for X amount of time, he interrupts everybody and says, all of this stuff that you're talking about, scrap it. Throw it on the ground. It's trash. We're not doing any of it. This is what Apple is going to be. Apple needs to have 4 basic pieces, 4 basic products that we create. That's it. We need to have 1 mobile device, 1 laptop, 1 desktop computer, and I forget what the 4th one was now. And he writes on the whiteboard these 4 things. And from now, and he ends up, like, by the time the meeting is done, he's basically restructured the entire company so that everyone's job at that company does something to support the creation and the sustaining of one of those 4 items. We don't need to revamp all of this. All that we need to do is focus on these 4 things and just make them the best that they can be. That's how you build a company. That's how you make money. And anyway, so, I mean, it speaks for itself. You mean Apple. Who doesn't know what Apple is, right? You know, everybody in the world has an I something or another. Anyways, so that's a really good story. I think that is indicative of him being a level 1-5 in my personal opinion. So that's an example. The reason I suggested the book Boundaries for Leaders is because Dr. Henry Cloud tells that story much better than I just did and in more detail in that book. So if you want an example of what a level 1-5 could look like in action, and by the way, with level 1-5s, there is a lot of action, you could pick up that book. There's a ton of other great stuff that you'll get out of it besides that story, but it's one really great anecdotal piece that I liked. So anyways, that is the different levels of health for Enneagram Type 5. You guys know the routine, you know, questions and comments and all of that, you know, down underneath of there, and I will get to them when I can. Thanks.